On behalf of the Natural Stone Institute and Stone World Magazine, thank you for joining us for today's session, Key Pulse Points for Building a Successful Stone Fabrication Business. We have a great program planned for you during the next 2 days. In addition to this session, we will be holding a virtual trade show immediately following today's discussion. This is your chance to speak with experts, take virtual tours, and see product demonstrations live. To join the virtual trade show, click on the link in your chat box or go to www.naturalstoneinstitute.org/virtual trade show to attend. Without further ado, I would like to introduce Eric Tryon. In 2002, Eric Tryon started Premier Surfaces in Atlanta, Georgia. This venture was completely different to his previous life in a coat and tie, white-collar world. However, his business philosophy remained the same. During his time at Premier Surfaces, relationships was his key. Frequently, he told his staff of 135 over 4 locations that we are a relationship company. Stone fabrication is just the product they represented. During his time as CEO of Premier Surfaces, the company had received many awards. A few highlights include Consumer Choice Awards in Atlanta each of the consecutive years from 2007 through 2015. He was also voted top 20 best places to work in Atlanta. Eric was also named one of the top 20 entrepreneurs in Atlanta in 2012 and 2015. In addition to local accolades and national accolades, Premier Surfaces was one of the first accredited companies by the Natural Stone Institute. Please welcome Eric Tryon.
Hey, thanks so much, Darren. Appreciate it. Talk about getting outside your comfort zone, folks. We are here, at least for me. I know the virtual thing is new to everybody and is starting to rapidly become the norm. I'm the type of guy that used to love to work the room, love to find the energy with individuals in the room, and love to use examples when we teach and go through these sessions. So just a couple footnotes on the front end of this of how this session is going to roll over the next 2 days. So you're going to have some educational topics of discussion. We're going to interject some videos from our hosts and our sponsors. If it wasn't for them, this would not be possible. And then we're going to have some surveys throughout the presentation. So there's no formal breaks as we go through this, but I do encourage you to get engaged and ask questions. We have a little box on the side. Everybody's free to type in any questions you have. We've got somebody that's going to notify me, hey, we've got a question, because that's the thing when I agreed to do this virtual educational series that I thought we would probably, the hardest thing to duplicate in a face-to-face setting are those questions and those interactions. So as much as we can make that happen, I'm going to encourage it all day long. So that's kind of the groundwork of how it's going to roll today. And we're going to get started by just thanking our host sponsor. And our host sponsor is Universal Granite and Marble.
Thank you all for joining us. We're your host, Universal Granite and Marble. Founded in 1999, Universal Granite Marble, also known as UGM, is one of the leading stone suppliers in the United States, with locations in Chicago, Illinois, Detroit, Michigan, Cleveland, Ohio, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, St. Louis, Missouri, and Omaha, Nebraska. Additionally, UGM also includes 2 trading offices, UGM Florida and the Stone Exchange in Brazil. For the last 20 years, UGM has made their mark importing flawless natural stone from all over the globe, including countries like India, Brazil, Italy, Spain, and many others. With an extensive range of suppliers, UGM ensures customers access to a year-round supply of the most sought-after granite, marble, and quartzite from around the world. In addition to natural stone, UGM also carries a plethora of engineered stone from several premier brands. The first being Vidara. UGM is an exclusive Midwest distributor of their new marble-like veined collection of quartz surfaces. Vidara surfaces are ideal for use in almost any interior application. This premium surface material is composed of 93% pure natural quartz, one of the hardest minerals on Earth. The next brand carried by UGM is Santa Margherita. Produced in Italy using cutting-edge Breton technology, Santa Margherita quartz is ideal for a wide variety of applications, from prestigious large open commercial spaces to intimately designed interior design solutions in kitchens, bathrooms, flooring, and more. And the last quartz line is UGM's private label U-Quartz collection. This carefully designed quartz collection includes a wide variety of unique colors that reflect today's hottest trends at an ultra-competitive price. And outside of quartz, UGM also carries a line of high-end porcelain slabs through the brand Escale. Escale porcelain is unlike any other sintered surface in the market. Escale slabs do not require tension relief cutting like other ultra-compact surfaces, which saves time and money. Made of 100% high-quality, all-natural minerals, this 12mm thick material is perfect for floor and wall applications and can even be used for countertops. Again, thank you all for being here today. After the meeting, we'd like to invite all of you to visit our website at www.universalgranite.com for more product information and a live look at our inventory for all 6 of our locations.
All right, I believe we're ready to roll into the presentation. I do want to say you're going to hear from the remaining sponsors throughout the rest of the presentation over the next 2 days. And again, please go visit them on the virtual trade show. A lot of new products, lots of new innovation in the marketplace, and you got to stay up to tune on exactly what those things are, because you don't want to miss out. So with that said, Aaron gave me a very nice introduction. Thank you, Aaron. As he said, I founded Premier Surfaces back in 2002 and started from no industry experience and really just one employee and kind of went from there. A lot of growing pains along the way, made a lot of mistakes, made a lot of progress in certain areas. Sometimes felt like we went forward 2 steps and then backwards 3 steps and so forth. You'll see on the screen a lot of the accolades and some of the accomplishments. I think that the one that I would stress the most is the first one, which was sustainable double-digit EBITDA, for 10 years running plus. At the end of the day, it all comes down to building profit inside of our organization, right? So the profit to me is the measuring stick that we all abide by. But overall, what we're going to talk about over the next 2 days, these are theory strategies that actually work. From a theory it starts to a strategy that gets deployed to producing tangible results, and they work. And I think reflecting back, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later today and maybe some tomorrow, but I grew the business from 2002 to 2017. I sold it in 2017. And I got to sit back and just kind of reflect as that transaction was happening. And ultimately, I ended up retiring in 2018. The way the direction the organization was going, I was just not in support of. Some of the things that I'm going to share with you today weren't emphasized. They were not a focus like they were in the past, and I could kind of see the handwriting on the wall that just it was going to be difficult to get behind something that just couldn't support, because I had a level of confidence and a level of trust of what, one, you have to focus on inside these businesses to make them successful, but 2, where that focus should be. And in this industry, it's really hard to not get distracted by all the moving parts, especially as we grow. So those are some of the tangible things that we've accomplished over the years. I think it boils down to a few key buckets. One is the right people in the right seat on the bus. If you don't have the people, then it's going to be really, really difficult to get things done. I think a unified process is probably number 2. Great people, if they don't know how to do the work, it's going to create a mini chaos organization with lots of distractions, and that makes it very difficult to execute and produce any results. And I think the last one, which is where I think people maybe miss the boat the most, is that they try to take on too much. This is about focusing on the few key things inside of our business that are going to produce the biggest tangible results. So I say it's the focus few versus trying to attack everything. And the temptation is there, believe me. And I've made every mistake in the book when it comes to trying to go after way too much with a huge appetite. And at the end of the day, you end up very, very challenged to produce any tangible results. So our seminar is going to talk to 3 points. It's about the people side of the business, which are the assets, the people assets, the processes, the SOP, and what I call the scoreboard, which is really about communication. It's the visual management tools that we implemented that produced results and drove behaviors at the frontline level that really, really made a difference day in and day out. So when you think about it, it's the who, the people, make sure that they're in the right seat. It's the, hey, how are we going to do the work? And we're going to agree upon that. And then the communication of what are we doing and the results that we're producing, are they on par with what we expect, or are we off? And if we're off, where? So it's really a three-legged stool. You need all three. I challenge people that you can't be great in one area and miss the other two, or great in two and miss the other one, because you're going to limit yourself on what you can accomplish. So I told you we're going to have some engagement today. So this is the first engagement that we're going to ask you to participate in. So this is a brief survey that's going to come up on your screen. And the question we want to know, and by the way, we're not going back to the detail of the person to identifying, hey, what did you put, yes or no? We're looking for an overall number of people that are on the call. How many answered yes? How many answered no? And the first question that we have is, does your company have a defined number one deliverable goal, and it's a metric for each position in the company? So is there a defined metric for each position in the organization of what their key focus point is going to be, or what the deliverable is to the rest of the team? I find it interesting when I always ask this question to companies I talk to, the owners and the managers will have one answer, but then when I go talk to the individual frontliners, the employees doing the job, you know, their answer sometimes is very different than what the owner or the managers is. And if that happens, there's a major disconnect. So I say, would the employees, would they know what their goal is every day? Would they know their actual results for that day, for that week, for that month, compared to the actual? And do they have evidence, I guess, of, hey, how do you know you're on track, or how do you not know you're on track? So that is our first survey of the day, and they're going to come back to me with some results here. And as we're waiting for those,
Eric, we have 27% that say yes and 73% that say no.
73% say no. So isn't it interesting that we put a lot of time and resources into our people day in, day out, and we charge them with the responsibility of going and working hard for the business today, yet they don't know what the number one deliverable for that role is, or for the company. And I wouldn't feel bad if you're in that camp, because I think that's the norm. That's the whole point of these series. And we're going to talk about how do you change that? How do you bring a little bit more clarity to the surface as you go through and start stepping back and building your organization. So on the people side of it, and again, I don't think I mentioned this early on, our goal, my goal at least for this educational series, is you take 1 to 2 things away from this that you can take back to your organization or your department and say, we're going to implement this, and we're going to create some type of tangible benefit or result out of it. I think if you try to do too much, there becomes a point where you're on overload and you get nothing done. So you may hear some good ideas today, have the discipline to write them down and say, that's awesome, but I'm really going to focus, prioritize these 2 things, and those other ones I'm going to save for down the road after we execute the priority items. So the people assets, most of our companies start as an entrepreneur or a very small entity organization, and then they start evolving and they start growing. So what got us successful early on, those same processes or the way we did business typically will not get us to the next level. Those things have to change. And now all of a sudden you add more resources in the form of people to our business. And we need these people to be productive, and we need these people to be good stewards of the goals and initiatives that we're trying to achieve. And I challenge anybody, I don't care how talented you are, how smart you are, you will not successfully grow your business by yourself. Not going to happen. You need, and it's a prerequisite for success, to have these people assets, the right person in the right spot, in the right role in the organization in order to achieve and move your organization forward, achieve results. So I always say either engage them or you're going to lose them, because they are going to go somewhere where they're going to feel loved and wanted. And I think the lack of communication, and we're going to get really into this tomorrow when we start talking about our scoreboarding, and I say win by design. We need to make sure that the system that we put in place does some of the heavy lifting for us in the form of rewarding people and recognizing people for strong performances. Hey, this was the goal for your specific responsibility or job title, and this is the actual results that you're producing. Good job, or hey, where did you fall short? And I don't think people come to work every day and say, hey, I can't wait to screw things up. They want to do well. It's up to the manager and the owner to make sure that they have the right tools, they've been put in the right position, first of all, they have the right DNA to do the job and do it well. And then, okay, once you're in the role and I put this person here, what's expected of them? How do they go about the job? Are they aware of their performance on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis? Are they failing or are they succeeding? And everybody wants to win. There's not a person I know that says, winning, it's okay. No, BS. People want to win, and they go up and they get excited and they get engaged at their job and what's in front of them if they know that they're succeeding every single day. And here is the challenge that I always get. My goodness, Eric, what you're talking about takes a whole lot of effort and a whole lot of work. Yes, it does. It cannot candy coat that one bit. And I always respond with the same way. And I said, well, it's suffer now or suffer later. And when the suffer later happens, it's usually a lot costlier. There's more friction in the organization. It impacts other departments, other people. And most importantly, it usually has a negative impact on our customers. So if you spend the time, invest the resources on the front end, making sure that we have the right people in the right role and they have the right DNA to do the job, that investment of the time and the dollars invested into it will have huge dividends on the back end in the form of happy repeat customers with sustainable results. And I go back to what we were able to do at Premier in the building days. We really started gaining traction and growing as an organization when we became scalable. Meaning scalable meant we had better people in the roles that were more equipped to do the job, that performed at a level that was much higher than their predecessors, and they delivered tangible results. So yes, it's a lot of work, but you have to absolutely roll your sleeves up. There's no shortcut to this. Now here's the bad news, and nobody's going to want to hear this. It's all your fault. I had a mentor tell me probably somewhere around 2008, 2009, hey, listen, you have exactly the team that you deserve. You have exactly the team that you built. So when I say it's all your fault, what you tolerate, what the management team tolerates day in, day out, becomes the norm. And what I mean by that, if you let things slide and say, I just don't have time to deal with that, I'm too busy chasing these shiny squirrels over here, then that performance becomes the norm. And if the person's not hitting the expectations of the goal, now you have a person inside the organization where failure is acceptable. And it all comes down to the owner. I always say, who puts the hiring managers in place, who hires the department managers, who's responsible for the onboarding, who's responsible for the training criteria. It all boils down to the leadership team. So if you're not happy, you've got to look in the mirror first and foremost and say, what's going on? And I think this is where we fool ourselves a lot. And when we look at reality compared to what we think it is, and I've got example after example of this, where we think we're achieving a certain goal, but we are so far away from that in the reality that it's just like looking in that mirror up top. What we feel and what we see, or what we are and what we see, are two different things. You know, I have people I respect, and I ask them inside their organization, hey, what's your yield or scrap rate? They give me this answer, we find out that it's this answer. It doesn't mean that they're bad people, but they're just not being realistic with looking at the detail. They think they have the answers based on experience from years and years and years ago, that those results still stand today. And I would challenge everybody, have the courage to go look at the actual numbers. The numbers do not lie. That's what makes the scoreboard so darn powerful. And if we just keep having turnover in our business, it's going to be really, really challenging. So it's all your fault. The good news is you can correct it. When we start looking at it on the people side of the business, people do want to win each day. The manager and the leader's job is to do a few things to make sure that they can win every day. First of all, we started looking at our recruiting, and we're going to get into a case study here. We're going to talk to somebody in a couple minutes where they recognized this and saw this inside their business, and they made a change and did something about it. But when we started looking at a role, we stopped looking at the person we were recruiting, and we started looking at the skill set required to do the job. Let me give you an example. A measure tech. What's most important for a measure tech to deliver to the rest of the organization? For us, it had to be right. We wanted them to be 10, 15 other things. And then you end up with a job description that's 4 pages long. Well, that purple unicorn just doesn't exist. So we dialed it down to what's the number 1, number 2 skill set required to be successful in this role. For a measure tech, it had to be right. It absolutely had to be right. So we started interviewing and recruiting for that skill set. And the best predictor of somebody's future success is what they've done in the past. So even our interview process of, hey, we need to prove that you've got the attention to detail, that the body of work that you produce is right. And that's what we're going to focus on. Prove to me that you have that in your past job experience. And that's where we dialed in. It was a game changer for us going forward. So matching the DNA of the person and the skills required to do the job, that's the leadership's fault. The worst thing we can do is put somebody in a role where they just are going to be set up for failure on the front end, and then we get frustrated and they're frustrated because they're failing every day and they're miserable for it. Leadership and management can do something about it. And then the last thing is, we ask our people to play with blindfolders on day in, day out, because we do not communicate and share information with them. Either we don't track it, it's hard to track, we don't know what to track, and it's really difficult to share the information because we have too many different things going on and we get lost into the details. So I think that really comes down to win by design on the front end. And we're going to talk to one of my friends here in a second. I want to go through one other just quick review, of the solution that we did at Premier that really made a difference. And I use pictures when I present a lot of times to make a point. We get wooed in the interview process and the recruiting process way too easily. We want to make excuses or prove all the reasons why something should work. I really like that person because, they just seem to have a great presence about them. Well, guess what? Presence has nothing to do with performing that role at a high level to set the team up for success, to make a positive contribution, not only to the role in the department, but ultimately do their heavy lifting for the organization. And when we get wooed, we get into this dangerous territory where we start making excuses for people of all the reasons why we hired somebody. And then we get really frustrated 30, 60, 90 days down the road when their level of performance is not up to par of what we thought it was going to be. And again, I go back to, I can't reiterate this enough, the biggest predictor of somebody's future is their past performance. And if you understand that concept and start interviewing towards it, they will show you a track record of success, and you'll have a much highly likely opportunity that they're going to be successful in the role. So with that said, I want to kind of transition, and we're going to talk to one of my friends, Victor, from Discover Marble and Granite. And Victor and I spoke, boy, it was probably a couple of years ago, and Victor was telling me about a scenario inside his business. He was really frustrated, and he really had some challenges with the people side of the business. And first of all, welcome, Victor. Good to see you, my friend.
Good to see you, Eric. How are you?
I am very good. I'm very good. Victor, I know we had, it seems like it was yesterday, but it was several years ago. We were talking at one of the events, and we had conversation and dialogue around exactly kind of what I've been outlining here of some of the frustrations that we went through as an organization. And you say, man, we went through this, we're going through the same thing, and this is what we did. And I thought it was a really cool story. Do you mind sharing with our audience, maybe a high-level overview, brief summary of some of your pain points that Discover went through, and kind of where you found yourself in, and then we can get into what did you guys do about it?
Sure. So you mentioned earlier, that hiring and getting the right people, you want to be winning by design, and I think we're trying to win by chance, right? And I think that's the case with a lot of us in the industry. It just happens that we have a lot of pressures from customers, vendors, current employees, that a lot of times we sort of put hiring and a good hiring process in the back burner. But it started to really affect the overall results at the end of the day, whether it was quality or the bottom line. We were having certainly a lot of issues when it came to hiring. So the approach that we took was quite simple. Basically, we decided to take hiring and create a process that was very similar to sales. When we think of sales, we're always out prospecting. We're always trying to fill that funnel and always have a good number of solid leads to work with. And when it comes to hiring, it will always be, hey, who do we need? What do we need? Let's start, let's run an ad, let's start interviewing. And the first 2 or 3 people that we interviewed, pick one. And that was pretty much the process. So when we changed that about 3 to 4 years ago, and we hired a full-time HR person and director of HR, and her job mainly was to continuously run ads on 3 different platforms, whether it was Craigslist, Indeed, and a couple of other ones actually, and always create a funnel for each department. And there was a process behind it. She would bring in candidates. She would first obviously go through applications or resumes, and then at which point she would do a quick pre-qualification over the phone. Once a candidate was pre-qualified, it would be brought in for an interview. That would be the first interview, and she usually did that interview. And her job at that point was to, what Eric said, if you have a specific position, whether it's a measure tech that you're hiring for, what are the qualities? What are you looking on that measure tech? She already knew, because we had a set of guidelines from each department supervisor. And so she would go through those questions and pretty much pre-qualify for a certain position. Once she did that, that became a candidate for that position, sort of a sales prospect. Anytime any supervisor in whichever department needed somebody, now they were contacting our HR department, and her job was, again, to have a set or a number of pre-qualified candidates that she could just hand it over to that supervisor, and that supervisor then would schedule a second or a third interview. So it would streamline the process. You would cut a lot of time out of the process, but not only that, the quality of the candidate and getting the right person in the right seat became, it was actually the best result that we got out of this, is just getting the right person in the right seat when we needed them in the shortest amount of time.
Victor, it sounds like, in listening to this, you use the analogy, which I love. You treated it like a sales call or like a sales agenda where you're always prospecting, right? Now you're always recruiting, right? It's never ending.
Never
Right?
ending, never ends.
Never stops. But I think that the biggest difference that I hear is now you have a dedicated resource that's their sole responsibility, is to be recruiting. And it's not an and item for a manager that's in charge of a department. Say if I'm a sales manager and I'm trying to grow sales every day, and now I have a need for a new sales rep, I'm not burdened with the go fill my funnel of recruiting a salesperson. I can delegate that with confidence to somebody where that's their primary responsibility and deliverable back to me, which, boy, it takes a lot of stress off.
Exactly.
Right. So can you speak, Victor, to the point where this didn't just happen overnight, right? I mean, this had to be quite an investment. Obviously, a dedicated HR recruiting person that's putting these processes into place is not cheap, right? You have to, you're dedicated into somebody's payroll. You're paying, an annual salary, whatever it is. It's 75, it's 100,000. It's at least $50,000 investment. For the people that are on the call or listening to the seminar that say, man, I just don't know if I can afford that expense, what would be your answer?
So, great question. We have experience on both sides of that. So our location here up in the Northeast, we've got 3 locations and 140 employees. So we can definitely afford to have that position. It actually more than pays for itself, because there are other reasons that I didn't mention. I mean, how many times we get that text message or that call from an employee that says, hey, do you have a minute to talk? And probably you get that gut feeling in your stomach that what's coming. They either giving you a notice, or they want to raise, or they had a better offer somewhere else. So you're not held, your back is never against the wall if you have a pool of candidates you can pull from. So it's great to have that position, but what if I couldn't afford that position? So we do have a location down in Florida, in Fort Myers, and we have 38 employees there. And we tried to do the same thing, to have the HR department here run the same program down there, but we found it extremely challenging, because a lot of the candidates that we get, a lot of the times the better candidates come through referral, and the referral through our own employees. So we do programs, for example, where they put flyers in churches, churches that they attend, events that they go to. So we try to make recruiting everybody's responsibility. Obviously, we offer a $300 bonus for somebody that recommends someone to the company, but what we found is for that HR director to work and do the same type of work for our location in Florida, it just didn't work out. So what we had to do is get a little bit creative down there, where we split that role into 2 or 3 different positions, head of departments. It's perfectly doable. We had somebody, the controller in the county, running the ads on the different platforms, creating the flyers. We had 2 other people in charge of communicating that to our staff, to do pre-qualification interviews over the phone. It's just a matter of there's not a one go-to person. It's more of a collective. You create a team within the organization. If you have 20 employees or 10 employees, it doesn't necessarily have to be the owner of the company that's always going out to try to hire that next candidate. I think there are people within your organization. We found that over in our location in Fort Myers that were more than willing and had maybe a couple hours a week, 3-5 hours a week to put into this. And there were never complaints, and they still run that program to this day. So they do pre-qualification the same way. It's just split into 3 different people, as opposed to centralized into one head of HR.
That's awesome information, Victor. And I love your mention of, engaging your existing team to go recruit and find great people. And I always use the analogy, hey, doesn't it make sense to fish in the right ponds that have the qualified people where we want to go hunt or fish?
So a quick great story on that, Eric, is that
76% of employees are not happy with their current job. To me, that just screams, hey, go find somebody that's one of those 76% of 100 that are not happy with the job, and they could be the best person ever, but for whatever reasons, they're not satisfied, and go there. I was always enamored with people that just want to place an ad in an area or a median or publication that is usually just littered with people that are unemployed, and that's typically not the person that I want to bring on board. I want to find somebody that's a kick-ass performer that maybe is just not happy in the environment that they're in.
Yeah.
Victor, I cannot tell you enough how much I appreciate your participation. And for you guys that are not familiar with Victor and his company or Discover Marble and Granite, it's a pretty impressive organization. And I think what I love about it is how intentional both him and his wife, Christina, are on understanding the strategies that they want to achieve, and then just going and implementing those things and watching them take root over time. The mix of their customer base, their growth and development of new channels of customers that they didn't get into before, and they do an unbelievable job. What I would consider the dashboarding and the communication side of their business, because they keep their people in the know, and they give them the actual results that they're performing each day, and I think it's just awesome. So obviously it's working for you, buddy. I'm happy for you, and thanks again. I appreciate it.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Hey, Eric, we've got a couple questions.
Okay, fire away.
Victor, before you run off too, you may answer these.
I'm here.
Randy commented a while back first that assigning those roles, that the people in those roles need to be empowered to own their role or their department as well. And then he asked again, at what organizational size do you find that HR person, the investment into a dedicated role, to be good ROI?
So I think Eric and I were sitting at a table not too long ago. It was an event in Vegas, and we were talking about these big gaps in the growth of the businesses, and where most companies struggle the most to get from, point A to point B, whether it's going from 3 million to 7 million in sales, 7 million to 12 million. And usually the profit margins get diluted at that point just because of all the chaos and the losses in the business. What we found is we did a lot later in the business. I think if I were to look back and do it, I think is once we hit that $8 to $9 million, and you think, hey, this is not, we're not big enough to have a role like that. But you'd be surprised on how much money can save you in many different ways, right? Whether it's just with simple I-9 audits, having a head of HR that can do that. It's safety. There's other things that a head of HR can do. So just keep in mind that we're talking about hiring, the hiring process. Then that may be 40% or 50% of the time, but you can help to offset the cost of that HR director with other very important roles in a company that's going to pay back really long term, whether it's preventing an accident, it's safety, it's all of that. But don't be focused on the cost of that person so much as to the benefit that they can bring. We always think of sales and production as the only two things in this business that really produces money and makes us money. But believe it or not, that role can be very, very profitable, or at least prevent a lot of losses and a lot of costs to the business. Yeah, so I would say that point, anywhere from 8 to 10 million, is a good point to where you start looking at that. There's outsourced HR that can do that. I'm not a big fan of those, but I've heard from some companies that have had some really good success in having recruiters and other outsourced services. I'm a big believer of just having everything centralized in the office.
I would agree with Victor on that. For us, it was 7 million, 7.5 million. We did in that growth journey. We were kind of stuck in that 7 million, 7.5 range. We never went backwards, but we didn't have the huge jumps until we made the investments into these things that we're talking about. And again, for us, it was, putting a dedicated person in place, putting the time and effort into training the managers on how to do this, what we're looking for, defining the roles and the KPIs by position. And when we did that, the level of performance went up. To Victor's point, you eliminate a lot of the friction because you don't have as many disruptions and the chaos in the business. And we went, where we had marginal growth year over year, then when these things started taking root, we went from 10 to 20 million like that in 1 year, and if you can imagine that growth. So Mark, do we have other questions as well?
No, we're going to hold on those for a bit.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Victor. Appreciate it, buddy.
Thank you all.
All right. At this time, we're going to hear from a couple of our sponsors. We're going to hear from Park Industries and Moreware.
Recently, we've all navigated through uncharted waters. Over the last several months, we've been agile with our business to meet your needs and have leveraged this time to innovate new solutions. Solutions that will reduce your operating costs, increase your production, and position your company as a market leader. As all of us push through the storm, there are many opportunities that lie ahead. Opportunities for you to refine your manufacturing processes, to reduce your operational costs. Opportunities for you to gain market share, and opportunities for you to meet the increasing and pent-up market demands. As the market rebounds, pressure will be placed on your business to deliver, and equipment reliability and uptime will be crucial. We would enjoy the chance to visit with you and explore innovative solutions. Solutions that will tool your business to meet the great opportunities that are right around the corner. For those of you ready to come out stronger than ever, let's visit. Now is the time. Since 1953, we've been proud to be made in the USA, and we're not going anywhere. It's times like this when you rely heavily on your partners, and you can count on us. Stay safe and strong.
All right, we are back. Love the Moreware little jingle music there, a little catchy. Very nice job, Harry and team. Very nice. Okay, we got our next poll or survey. This is the second one of the day. So the question is, does your company have clearly documented standard operating procedures, SOPs, outlining how the business is run? And it's a yes or no answer, folks. It's not a gray. Either people know it or they don't. And I would say, does it happen at the department level? Does it happen at the general level? Do people know how, if we ask the same 20 people to do something, would we get the same response? And we'll wait for that to come in for a second, as we are going to transition now from the people side of the business to the process and the systems. So assuming we've got the right people in the right seat on the bus, and I'm realizing that we've got way too much content in here. We're going to have to speed through some of these to stay on our timeline. But I will also extend an invitation. If you want to follow up with any of these, you'll have my contact information after, because there's just so much detail that we could get into for each one of these topics. I think I could have spent the entire 2 days on just the people side of the business because it's such an important topic. So
Eric,
Mark,
we do have the polls in, and 28% said yes, 72% said no.
well, we're consistent. So we were at 73% no for clearly defined number one deliverable for position. Now we're at 72% of no standard operating procedures. So see the theme that's starting to develop here, folks. And again, I go back to the mirror example. It's all your fault if you're a manager or an owner. I say that, kind of joking, but kind of serious, that this is an investment into your organization if you want to evolve, reduce the friction points, make everybody's role a little clearer every single day to ultimately provide them a more rewarding work experience and to generate more sustainable results. So we're talking process and systems, and I use the example all the time. What would a building look like if it was built without blueprints? Could you imagine, right? How many people are involved? A lot. How many different trades? A lot. But there were no blueprints. There was no how to do it. And there was no end game or communication of information on what we were trying to accomplish. I think we all know it would be really, really difficult to get a final result that we would all be happy with. I think the best book that I could recommend in this area, I got exposed to back in the early 2000s. It's called The E-Myth. I think now it's The E-Myth Revisited. The author is Michael Gerber, and he goes into a great detail. I'm not going to spend a lot of time with it today on the why it's so important to have a uniform method on how we perform our jobs. But again, as I said earlier, our companies start and they evolve. They usually start from very small and they start growing. The same things that were successful early on will not do it. They will not handle the load, will not have the capacity to generate similar results as you grow. I promise you, there's a lot of frustration that comes with that, because when we look at it, we used to have one person doing an entire job from start to finish. Now we could have up to 10, 15 different people touching the same job. There are just so many moving parts. And I say, being in the stone fabrication business is really interesting. This level of codependency is like nothing I've ever seen. There are so many different departments, so many different people that have their hands on one job, that there's so many opportunities for things to get sideways in a hurry. And when they do get sideways, they're really, really costly. So the benefit of the process and the systems, it really creates clarity and it eliminates all the translations that every individual typically has. So it provides this unity to the team of, hey, this is how we roll, this is how we do it. I love this reference. One of my favorite movies is Step Brothers. If you haven't watched it, you're missing out. You owe it to yourself. Every line in that thing is creatively written. No matter how many times you watch it, there's still some benefit from it. But this level of codependency that comes up, it really is about removing the gray areas, removing the translations from people. Because if I have 20 different people and I ask them, hey, how do we do this? If it's not clearly defined and relentlessly put in front of them and coached and taught until it's coming back to me and I know and verified that they got it, I'm probably going to get 20 different opinions. And that just spells opportunity for error. One of the best things that we ever did is, we had this University of Premier Surfaces content and training program that we would put every new employee through. And the benefit of this was it was over departmental lines. So it didn't matter who you were in the organization, what department you were in. If you came to work for Premier, you were going through the University of Premier Surfaces. And the benefit of that is everybody got to see what the deliverable was from this department and the handoff to the next department. So when the next person in line is expecting your body of work to be in this format because this is what they're going to do with it. And we took it way beyond just the theory of talking about it. We made them actually go sit in the seat and do that job alongside that person for days at a time. So that they had a level of experience and detail associated with what a day in the life is for that particular role and what the friction points are. And when you leave something out or you miss something or you're not clear on something, what type of ambiguity that causes that you have to stop, go track down information, and then come back to your job. And anytime we've got to stop in the middle of something, again, opportunity for error goes through the roof. So I'm going to share with you just 3 examples of SOPs. Now, these are along the lines of the people side of the business. They don't have to be. I could share with you, hey, how do we measure a job? What's the template role, and how do we go about when we walk into somebody's house, the SOP for the things we want to accomplish and how we're going to go about it. If I've got 10 different measure techs, I don't want to have 10 different bodies of work and deliverables of how they hand their job in. It's got to be pretty much identical, whether it's Dave or John or Ray or Martha. It's got to be the same. And I think that's really, really important. And there's an opportunity to go absolutely overboard on this. And I think that's the warning that I would give people, because as we grow, it becomes more difficult when you change an SOP. How do you get that information down to the frontliners so that they all get it and are coached on it? Again, this is an investment into time. And I go back to my experience with, our private equity group. The training that we would do with, say, the University of Premier Surfaces or the SOPs or the hiring, was seen as an expense because it went into overtime because people had to come in early at 7 a.m. to go through that training. When that stuff started taking away, the results started getting impacted, not for a good benefit, but for the negative. And those decisions have consequences over time. So the first thing, the manual that you see on the left, this was our people are everything binder. It was exactly how we wanted to handle the interviewing process, the recruiting process, the hiring process. So this is an example, and when you open it up, every manager will go through the training content, but there were so many resources all in one spot. Every manager had one of these, and it was just filled with resources and content of exactly how we were going to do something. I'm going to share with you in a couple slides. Let's see. I'm going to skip around here a little bit, so bear with me. This was our hiring outline, for instance. Okay, so on this top line here, you have all the steps for the process of what we were going to do. And by my count, it's anywhere from 6 to 10 steps that we had. And on the left-hand column, every department inside the organization: sales, project management, measure tech, programming, shop, field, accounting. So when we went through an interviewing process, these were all the steps that had to happen to recruit, interview, and hire somebody. It was clearly defined. Every manager was trained on it. And there was no guessing of what it was going to look like and how we were going to do it. To Victor's point earlier, he put an intentional system in place that started making a difference in the quality of people that they hired. But the hiring SOP is an example of this is how we roll when it comes to the people side of our business. When we want to recruit for a job, okay, I'm going to show you this one. These were all the top 3 KPIs by position in the organization of what the deliverable was for that role. So our lead installers, and I'm going to put my glasses on it. Your intent is not necessarily to read here, just to understand the process behind it. We wanted them to have less rework, less than $150 of rework per month. We wanted them to have greater than 96% completions on installs, and we wanted them to have a VOC score of greater than 9.5%. That was for our lead installers. Notice on there, nowhere does it say the quality of the install per se. Now, is quality of the install important? Yeah, it is. But we really think that the survey score and the interaction that lead installer has with the customer is more important, because the most important factor for us was how did the customer feel about the interaction? That to me is the most important thing. Yes, I want them to be technically sound. Yes, I want them to do great things in the field and be a master communicator. But how the customer felt about the interaction, to me, was the most important thing. I'll share one more example here. We had a programmer. This is column 3. They have 1 deliverable to the team. 0 rework. That's it. It had to be right, because if it wasn't right, think about what happens. That job gets transitioned and passed over to the fabrication floor. The job gets produced. We're making something. We're investing overtime dollars. We're using resources of our equipment, the material, all to make something that was never going to be right. Absolutely crazy. So we put a lot of emphasis on the number one deliverable was it had to be right. So that's what they were graded and that's what they were dashboarded on. That drives behavior. When you dashboard that information and share it with them every single day, they know exactly where they stand. It's going to change the behavior. We're going to talk a whole lot about that tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be completely dedicated to that resource. So I know we got to kind of zip through here a little bit, and we're getting behind the 8 ball, but I just wanted to show you, I'm going to show you one more SOP after we have another break for our video for our sponsors right now. All right. We are back and we are ready for our last survey of the day. I wonder if we're going to rank in the 70s again. So here is the poll and the question. And the question is, does your company have clearly documented onboarding and training processes for every new hire in each department? Yes or no? Does your company have clearly documented onboarding and training processes for each department for every new hire? And it's a yes or a no. Don't overthink it. As we're waiting for those answers to come in, I do want to go back to one point that I kind of had to blaze over a little quickly on an SOP, but I think one of the big significant movers for us is when we started really focusing with our managers what we were recruiting for, and we got away from recruiting for a person and recruiting for a skill set. And when we interviewing for that skill set and interviewing somebody's track record for success. So I think it's really important. Again, I could spend a whole day on that, but it's just one of those things that was a game changer for us, and I know it will be for anybody that takes the time and invests the energy into it. So Aaron, do we have?
Yeah, Eric, we've got the results in. 80% no on this one.
80%. So we got 73%, 72%, and now 80%. Man, I think we picked the right topics, folks, based on what we're doing. If the people are the most important part of our business, and if we've got to give them clear marching orders on how to do their job each and every day, and then we onboard them with no training whatsoever, what type of result could we expect? So it doesn't surprise me. And again, I wouldn't feel bad if you're in that camp or in that boat. It's the norm. It's what happens because nobody will take the time. There's too many moving parts. We're too busy with what's going on, and it's really, really difficult. And tomorrow we're going to dig into where our focus should be inside of our dashboarding and our tracking. So I'm excited for that. But before we wrap up today, we're getting close. I'm going to share one. Again, this is an SOP. It's just like a process or a system. It could be how we measure, how we install, how we recruit, how we hire, how we fill in the blank. But it's getting everybody on the same page. So one of our biggest challenges was finding qualified lead installers years and years ago. And we said, you know what, we're going to stop hiring retreads in the industry and trying to break all these old habits. And we said, you know what, we're going to make our own little install terminators based on exactly how we want them to operate and roll every day. So we had this training program where we started as an apprentice, and it changed the type of person we hired as an apprentice. We hired people intentionally with the understanding that they were going to evolve and grow through a training program and become a lead installer within a certain period of time. So they weren't a helper anymore. They were going through a training program. They were sitting in the passenger seat as they were learning, but the expectation was they weren't going to be a helper for long. They were going to grow and turn into to this little Terminator installer. And boy, it was wildly successful. It was a huge investment, obviously, because we weren't paying $8 an hour anymore. We're paying 10, and as soon as they come out of the training program, it's going up for there. So more money, more time on the front end, but my goodness, the end result on the back end was huge. At any given time, we had 3 usually competent, ready to go, very hungry installers that had just gone through the program that were ready to get in the driver's seat and be the lead. So could you imagine that, having a situation where you've got too many? And it's exactly what happened. So in this onboarding manual, and I want you to notice on the screen, you see the cover of the manual, but you also see the layout for the onboarding process. And it's very specific. Week 1 through week 6, there's content and focus points on each and every aspect. And I know you're all going to say, oh my gosh, Eric, so much work. How can I take the time to do this? How can you afford not to, is what I say. Yeah, it's a little bit of work on the front end, but once you do it, you have it. It's right there. And do we want to really onboard somebody formally with just shadowing somebody and letting that somebody come up with what they think the person should get exposed to and how they should do something, or do we want to get really intentional about it? And we got really intentional. So you see the content for each week, what the focus point was. And we had a testing and review session with the manager of the department. Oops, excuse me. And what do you think it does to the training or the mentor in this process? Listen, they're doing the same job day in, day out. Some of them have been doing it for years. And now you give them an additional responsibility. Hey, I want you to take the pride, initiate the effort to train and onboard James. Would you do that? And we would pay the elite installers for their efforts to that, and they loved doing it. It was a badge of honor. They felt like they were providing an even greater contribution to the team. And when you're going to teach somebody, they usually go out of your way to do it right. So I just want to really quickly, before we close, in this binder, all these things, and a new hiree, an onboard for somebody that came in, they would have frequently asked questions all inside this manual in one spot. Their PTOs, what holidays do we have every single year? Okay, safety and driving, what the expectations were. And these are just a few things that I thought were important. Safety on the job, safety driving the truck, their first paycheck. What is that going to look like? What does it consist of? What's our payroll schedule? All these questions answered. Your role in training, that's really important. What is their role in the training? We used to be really, really forward and direct and say, listen, you have a role in this. You're not just sitting in the seat sleeping. You have a binder you're going to have, and it's got to get filled out every single day, because at the end of the week, you're going to have a test and it's going to get reviewed with your manager. If you don't pass, you can't be on the team. So clear expectations on what their role in the training was. Career advancement opportunities. What typically is the ladder and what does it look like? It doesn't mean they're restricted to that, but it just helps for them to see, hey, you're not just hired to be an installer day in, day out. There are career opportunities here for you. This is not a dead end position. Job description of what's most important, the deliverable for their role. Expectations as they're going through the training. Top deliverables, winning communications to your customers, what's most important. Last 5 minutes with a customer, we thought was really important. I love this one, professional appearance, and I got to show you the picture. You know, we got really specific of how we expected and the expectations we create for how they would dress and appear in front of customers each and every day. There's a lot of detail there, there's no doubt, but every one of our positions had a process around how they were going to be onboarded. And again, 80% of our people have no formal, of our companies and people that are engaged in this seminar today don't have a formal process. So what are the people doing? You've invested the time, effort, and energy. And if the numbers are accurate, and every time we turn somebody over, it cost us 1.5 times the annual compensation for that person. Think about how much money is just going out the window in the form of you not being intentional and you making it a priority inside your business. We need the people to be successful. They want to be successful, I promise you. They just have to know what right looks like, and they got to be able to see the results. And we're going to talk about how they see the results a whole lot tomorrow. So are back. I want to just pause for a minute, and we're going to get into our Q&A here in a second. Before we do that, I kind of challenged everybody on the front end to listen, take one or two things away from this that you can go back and commit to inside your organization or your department or even your whatever your circle of influence is, that you can commit to that you think will have a positive impact. And those things, as soon as we get off today, as soon as you get off today, you're going to be bombarded with voicemails, text messages, emails, the list goes on, and you never get that reflection time. And I'm just going to encourage everybody to just take a minute right now, pause, and say, what is the one thing? What is the two thing that I'm going to commit to giving a try or going back into my organization and putting a concerted effort towards? If you have a list of 5, you got to pick 1 or 2. You got to prioritize, put the others on the shelf and say maybe, but the timing's not right now, because if you try to do too much, you'll execute very poorly and it won't get done. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Before we get into the Q&A here, which we're going to do, tomorrow's session is all geared towards putting some tools in place to help do some of the heavy lifting that's not being done today. Again, when I see all these things as a result of our survey, 73%, 72%, and 80%, all in the negative category of we don't have this inside of our organization, it just screams to me, well, there's a lot of room for improvement. And tomorrow's session is going to be about bringing visibility to that, and then making sure that we can have that be positive momentum inside of our organization. So with that said, I know it's got a bunch of questions. So Mark?
Yeah, hey, Eric. I've got a bunch of questions, so I'm just going to read them off to you one at a time. First one goes back a little bit. Josh asked, how do you hold your employees accountable for the KPI, and what happens when they didn't hit those marks?
Oh my gosh, that's a great segue for tomorrow. So the beautiful thing about the scoreboard and the things that we're going to be talking about tomorrow is we don't have time as managers and leaders to stop and have all these individual conversations. It's not practical. So when you take the information and you take the data out and you make it information and you put it in front of the people, the frontliners, their behaviors will change because nobody wants to be in the red, meaning they're not hitting their goal. Right? So there's some work on the front end to create expectations. Here's the goal. Here's your actual results as it relates to that goal. And here's the variance. And if your variance is negative, if you're not hitting the mark, your name's going to be in red. Nobody wants to be in red. And we're going to talk about tomorrow, how do you harness this human nature where nobody wants to fail? I want to do well every day. So I'm going to go out of my way to do what's necessary so that my name is in green, not red. And we're going to talk about that tomorrow in a lot of detail.
I thought you might cover that tomorrow. And for those who can see the chat messaging, I did post a link for anyone who's not registered for tomorrow, so there's still time, they can register last minute. Next question is from Robert. How do you handle a language issue for non-English speaking folks that have great attitudes?
Some of our best employees, most productive employees, English was the second language. So we made the investment into translation of meetings. And sometimes that's really hard as an owner or manager, whether it was written content where we had to communicate information, or it was a meeting agenda and you got to have it translated. Literally, we're talking a sentence, it gets translated, next sentence, talk about challenging and difficult. But I always thought that our non-English speaking employees really were appreciative of that. They would go out of their way to say thank you, because could you imagine, again, we're going to talk about this tomorrow, but trying to do your job every day where you're blindfolded, I'm not even understanding what they're asking for or what they're saying. I mean, you talk about scary and intimidating. So we tried to eliminate all those variables as possible and make it as a comforting environment. Again, it's an investment into time. It's an investment into an expense of getting something translated, written. I think even in the accreditation program, Mark, right? You guys went through the expense to get all of the content and the information translated from English to Spanish. It's a big deal, but I think it's absolutely worth it.
Absolutely. This one I think is a two-part question from Randy, or it came in twice, so I'm going to try and put it all together for you. So a lot of the training and revolves around new hire and onboarding. How were you able to implement these same principles with existing employees, since they ultimately drive behaviors through example?
Great question. So each department manager had a day and a time on a weekly basis. We would call it the master's class for their specific discipline. So for a lead installer, since we were talking about that earlier, you know, they would meet on Tuesday mornings for an hour. Again, think about this investment into time, right? We had 20 or 30 installers in a room for an hour, and they're not out doing installs. It's a huge investment. But that hour was spent with a manager leading training sessions based on where they knew they had to provide a little bit more training based on results that happened the previous week. So we tend to have a problem with last 5 minutes with a customer, and because we have all these callbacks that were not really legit. But if we slow down with a customer in the last 5 minutes and get those things answered, give the customer our cell phone number so they're not calling the office, would be a perfect example of what we would call master's training class. And we required that for every department manager would have to lead that. And it was a standing time every single week. So the entire team would know, the scheduling department would know. I think our installers were on Tuesdays. Our sales department, I think, was on Wednesdays. The shop would do it, a huddle. I believe it was on a Thursday, but the manager had the autonomy to come up with what needed to be trained towards. Again, the beautiful thing about the scoreboarding is over weeks and months, this pattern starts developing with your department, and specifically as you drill down to the individuals in that department. If you're read every single week and every month, what's going on? I mean, that's a huge awareness thing. And managers had to answer that question in our leadership meetings, which happened every single Tuesday at 10 a.m. It was an hour to 2 hour meeting. And if you're on there and you're read, you've got to explain to all your peers and other managers what's going on and why and what you're doing about it. So the training towards the more experienced, or the people that were doing the job every day, did happen every single week. And it was an hour investment every single week.
Good. I think you answered Randy's question. Randy, if you have follow-up questions, or anybody in the session today wants to ask Eric a question, now's the time to type them into that question box. We've got one more from Liv. We're just 2 years into the business in a market where most of our competition uses subs versus employees. How do we jump to the level you're talking about when it's still just a couple of owners and subcontractors? We'd love to grow, but that next step, we're a small shop and still not sure how. It's hard enough to find guys that have legal documents.
So great question. So there's huge benefits of having subs, right? Because as your business slows down, you can slow down and you don't have to worry about keeping people employed. As your business grows and you find a level of consistency where you feel like, you know, you're not going to have these ebb and flows of business, and you're not going to have these huge valleys or troughs where business slows down, you know, you make an investment into an internal install resource. And that was always, I guess, the strategy that we employed, at least in the Southeast at Premier when I was growing the company, that we felt like we had to invest into the people, and we had to invest into direct install crews, because we want to control. When we had that master's training class on Tuesdays at 7 a.m., you know, it's hard to ask your sub to come in and do that. And if you do, they're going to want to get paid. So I think there's ways to do it with subs. I would recommend you pull a couple good ones aside. You maybe even pay them more, creating the expectation of, hey, this is what we expect our customers to be treated like. This is the protocol and the SOP we want the install done with. You know, 5-star reviews and referrals are really important to us. And this is how we expect you to do your share to help those out. It's a balance act. It really is. But there are benefits of subs. But I have no use or tolerance for a sub that is not willing to kind of commit to us as well. It's kind of like a relationship. It goes both ways. If they have the desire to do good work and they're open to following your processes and procedures, and maybe you pay them more than you pay some of the other subs, or maybe you pay them more than they're getting paid from some of your competition. But for me, long term, I just think the drinking the Kool-Aid and the culture of that unity, so that you have control and you have the expectations from the frontliners that they're wearing your uniform every day and they're part of that team, is really important. So I think subs are a great way to help scale your business. So my recommendation would be start bringing on dedicated direct employee install teams one at a time. And the way I would do it is a 2-person crew. That second person is in training on day one. And the expectation is that they could lead their own crew at the 60-day mark. Absolutely feasible if you're intentional about it. We all started small. So, there's no one way to do it. I just share and really like to coach to the topics that we had a lot of success with. Any other questions, Mark?
That's all we've got coming in right now, but we'd encourage anybody else that wants to type in a question, submit it, and we'll get to it as quickly as we can. Otherwise, I'll turn it back over to you, Eric, and Aaron, if we've got some closing remarks coming up.
Yeah, I would say, we're right on time, so I'm good on this end. Aaron, is there anything you want to announce for tomorrow? Or I've got up on the screen, I think, the access to the virtual trade show, of just accessing that website or link. And maybe, Aaron, if you can share with them where they could find that, would be good.
Yes.
But tomorrow, same station, same bat channel, same bat time. Looking forward
Yes,
to it.
thank you, Eric. I want to give him a virtual round of applause for a great discussion today, and thank you everybody who attended today, because it was very, very interactive. Right now, we have a great opportunity to become very interactive with a number of our sponsors. They're holding a number of demonstrations, different discussion topics. So if you go to www.naturalstoneinstitute.org/virtual trade show, or if you click on the link, you'll be able to go to the virtual trade show and visit a lot of booths, see some videos, and also interact with a lot of the different sponsors, and they'll be able to answer your questions on a lot of topics. But I want to thank Eric. He did a great discussion today, and tomorrow we're going to go into a lot of the case studies that really exemplify a lot of the theories that he brought up today. Eric, do you have any final comments before we close?
No, I think, it's a lot of content to try to get into to the level of detail that I would really like to. So, I'm really excited about tomorrow's topics, because I think it's one of those things that not a lot of people do, but it can have huge impacts on your business in a good way. And it can be, your best friend when you talk about accountability and turning data into information and putting information in front of the people that are going to either make things happen or they're not. And one of the things I didn't mention, there are decisions that happen every single day inside of our business and our departments from our people that we have deployed to do jobs. And some of those decisions are the right decisions, and some of those decisions may not be in line with objectives and goals or SOPs on how we do it. And there's a cost to that. Sometimes those decisions end up creating some huge hornet nests with customers, and those things become really, really costly. And I think it's all about reducing those friction points. And this scoreboard concept can do a lot of that, because it brings the performance of the individual to the surface. And a lot of people don't do that, don't know how to do it, don't even know where to start. And I'm going to hopefully provide some ideas around that and give you some resources and some methods to going about that process to make life easier for you and more satisfying for your actual frontliners and the people that are in the trenches with the battle scars every single day.
Couple last minute questions if you've got a few minutes.
Listen, I got all the time you want, so fire away.
Well, we want to get to the virtual trade show, and we've asked each of those sponsors to have those rooms and sites open available for an hour or so for attendees today. But a couple more questions. One from Randy. How are you able to manage the emotional component of converting your organization into a more formal engagement, especially against the inevitable "we're going corporate" backlash?
Yeah, I think there definitely is that. But if the messaging is correct, we're going corporate. Think about the benefits to the person. And again, I go back to the analogy. You and your entire team doesn't like playing in the dark. And today they're probably playing in the dark. You know, they think they're doing the right things. They don't necessarily know. And if you come about it from the perspective of, listen, we're doing this so that we can create a greater good for the organization, a better experience for our customers, and a better operating metrics for the company, because the better the company does, the more satisfied customers we have, the more opportunity that we can provide for our employees. If we're creating, and everybody has their own translation and their own way of doing it, and we're not bringing any methods to the madness, you know, we're just going to be spinning our wheels and all these friction points. This becomes about our goal is to make your job easier every day so that we can ultimately make you more money every day. And that was, again, I think one of the big disagreement points that I had with our private equity group. You know, I was not opposed to our people making money. In fact, I wanted our people to make a lot of money because they were wildly successful at their job. They did it so good every day. And I used to tell our team, listen, I want you to make more money in less time with less headaches every day. That's my goal for you. And that's why we do these things. And this is the expectation that I want from each of you and your participation and contribution towards that, because we can't do it alone. You know, I started this presentation out by saying, no matter how talented the owner is or the manager is, you need your team to perform at a high level to generate results. That's the bottom line. And this is about doing that and creating a better working experience for our people. And you know, somebody's compensation is not a line item on a spreadsheet. There's a lot more to the story than that. You know, and it was really frustrating to try to communicate that, you know, to people with very high levels of financial acumen, like, hey, listen, yeah, they're making money, but look at what they're doing over here. Look at the level of performance that they're bringing to the table that is best in class. This is exactly what we want. So that's what I would say to the corporate. Is it corporate? Well, it's more organized, that's for sure. And if somebody's going to make an argument that being more organized is bad, we would agree to disagree.
Thanks, Eric. I was going to agree with you on that in the dark comment, especially from our poll results today. So hopefully you've given everybody a few tools so they can turn the lights on and communicate that to their teams. Had one question from Leighton here. A lot of the references so far today have pertained to higher volume companies, 5 million and up, and with lots of employees. When dealing with smaller companies, 1 to 3 million or fewer than 20 employees, how do you scale those principles down and deal with them similarly?
Well, the danger of that, I would say that, you know, these principles still apply for small companies. The challenge is in a small company, right? I can yell across the office to communicate information and correct something. What happens when I'm not there or I didn't catch it, right? Now I'm off at a meeting and I didn't overhear that person and correct what had to be corrected, right? So even in a small organization, I think you can gain even more traction because they can have active input onto what these things look like. And, you know, employees want to be heard. They want to contribute and make a positive contribution towards an organization. Take advantage of that, harness that, you know, and when they have it and you've extended it to them, they feel valued and they feel like they're a part of something bigger. And I would say you can't start this too early. And the quicker you start this, the more benefits you're going to have. And to that person that asked that question, please go out and get the E-Myth by Michael Gerber, and he does such a great job of laying out the why you need SOPs and why you need to have a system and a process, no matter how small your organization is. Because I'm assuming you're small, but you want to get big. If you don't have any friction points and things are just going so smoothly that you never have any issues, then you could be an anomaly. Just stay right there. But a lot of times the challenge is going from small to big, and there's a lot of jump off points that have to happen of things you have to do when you're bigger, more employees, more resources, more organization required compared to when you're small.
Robert had another question jumping back onto the language issue. He's got a couple of excellent installers that have communication issues and customers, and we know you touched on that key KPI for installers in having satisfied customers. Do you have any comments on how Robert might deal with that?
Can you repeat that question one more time, Mark? I'm sorry.
So it's back to the English language issue. He's got a couple of great installers, but they have communication issues with customers. Any ideas on how to improve that?
Yeah. So, and if you ask the customer what their number one complaint is with their contractors, what do you think it is? Probably the lack of communication, right? So it's a big deal. It's the number one frustration from a customer's perspective is the lack of communication from, and this is across the board for all construction trades, whether it's proactive communication or it's communication at the job site. So if you have a language barrier there, I would say you have to be creative and put more things in place to overcome that, whether they're handouts that explain something and, it's the installer understanding what they're handing out. It's the investment into maybe the person working on their language barrier a little bit. Maybe that's a couple month investment into some key things that they have to take ownership of and do on their end. But I think that's important that you do overcome that, because it's got to get addressed. And I don't have a perfect answer for you other than you can if you pose the question to your team and you sat down as a group, you're going to come up with some solutions. Hey, if we had to communicate better with our customers because we have a language barrier, how would we do it? There's no bad answers. Throw them up on the board and you're going to come up with some pretty good ideas, I would bet, if you engage your team and allow them to ask those questions. That makes sense?
It does to me. Hopefully Robert's satisfied with that. You had a good idea there. I've seen other teams where they had an English speaking apprentice along with the lead installer, and he could do some of the explanation and translating. Like you said, there's lots of ways, and you'll get ideas from your team. And those are going to be the best ones for employee buy-in.
Yep.
And for Jazz, here's that email you asked for, and everybody else. I think that's wrapping it up for the questions today, and we ran a little bit long, but they were good questions.
All righty. We'll see everybody tomorrow. Hope you can make it. Thank you.